wait at Fort Lauderdale, would you?
Flight of the Navigator wasn't just another Disney sci-fi, it was a strange, chrome-plated dream that somehow became a cult classic. A boy ripped from his own time, a spaceship that shimmered like liquid metal, and an alien computer who cracked Pee-wee jokes. It all added up to something unforgettable. But behind the magic, the production was messy, experimental, and stranger than anyone expected. These are 20 crazy facts about Flight of the Navigator you probably never knew. The heart of Flight of the Navigator began in the mind of Mark H. Baker, an unknown writer with an unforgettable dream. One night, he imagined a boy vanishing inside a spaceship and returning years later unchanged, while the entire world had moved on. When he woke, the idea refused to fade. He scribbled everything down in frantic detail, determined not to lose it. This dream became the first draft of his script, originally titled Vanished. Unlike the playful Disney film, Baker's draft was eerie, mysterious, and darker in tone, leaning more toward Close Encounters of the Third Kind than family adventure. Yet the hook was undeniable, a child lost in time. That single concept carried such emotional power that Disney couldn't ignore it, even after reshaping it into something brighter. Before Randall Kleiser was hired, Disney almost gave the project to Brian De Palma. His vision for Flight of the Navigator would have been far more intense, leaning into paranoia and psychological suspense. Imagine David Freeman trapped in a story dripping with dread, government conspiracies, and an alien ship that felt more menacing than magical. Disney realized quickly that pairing De Palma's thriller-heavy style with a children's sci-fi adventure would never work. Oil and water. Instead of wonder, audiences would have gotten fear. Executives pulled back, looking for someone who could balance adventure with accessibility. By turning away from De Palma, they avoided a version of the film that could have scarred an entire generation of young moviegoers. The title Flight of the Navigator sounds iconic now, but it wasn't always the plan. Early drafts carried names like Vanished, Spaceboy, and Grounded. Some sounded too bleak, while others felt overly childish. Disney wanted something that struck the right tone, adventurous and mysterious, but not frightening. After much debate, they finally landed on Flight of the Navigator. It felt bold and inviting, promising a journey rather than just a disappearance. Titles matter more than most people realize. They set the mood before audiences even step into theaters. In this case, the name carried just enough mystery to hook kids without scaring parents away. The title itself became part of the film's legacy, remembered just as strongly as the ship, Max, or David's strange disappearance. Before Joey Kramer was cast as David Freeman, another name briefly caught the casting team's attention: Joaquin Phoenix. Casting directors noticed his serious demeanor mixed with youthful vulnerability, qualities that could balance wonder and fear. He was considered for early auditions, though he never progressed far in the process. Ultimately, Disney went with Joey Kramer, who carried a more approachable, every kid vibe better suited for a family audience. It's a fascinating what if. With Phoenix in the role, the movie might have leaned darker and more dramatic. Instead, his breakthrough came years later, while Flight of the Navigator became a cult classic with Kramer's face at its center. Long before Sex and the City made her an icon, Sarah Jessica Parker played Carolyn, the quirky NASA intern. To her, the role barely registered. Years later, she admitted it was little more than a summer job she hardly remembered, just another paycheck. But for audiences, her wide-eyed humor stood out in a cast dominated by stern scientists and government men. Parker brought a human touch, injecting warmth into otherwise cold, clinical NASA scenes. Ironically, the part she dismissed as forgettable became beloved by fans, remembered decades later as one of her earliest film appearances. It's proof that sometimes the roles actors least expect to matter end up leaving the strongest impressions. What she thought was a throwaway gig became a permanent piece of cult film history. When you watch Flight of the Navigator, you'd assume the alien ship's interior was built on a Hollywood soundstage. In reality, the sleek spacecraft scenes were filmed in Norway. Why Norway? Financing. European investors wanted their piece of the production, so Disney packed up and shipped the crew overseas. Director Randall Kleiser admitted it felt backward. American exteriors shot in Florida, futuristic spaceship interiors built in Europe. The small-town American neighborhoods clashed with shiny, chrome-lined alien sets designed abroad, creating a blend that looked both familiar and alien. The move was entirely practical, but on screen it gave Flight of the Navigator a unique texture. A story that looked like it belonged nowhere, yet everywhere, all at once. Believe it or not, the Navigator's ship design came from teapots. Early sketches produced uninspired shapes, blocky and awkward, even compared to a flying toaster. Nothing felt right. Then designers noticed how light curved across reflective teapots, creating the illusion of flowing movement. That inspiration changed everything. The ship became sleek, elegant, and almost alive. To finish the job, Disney turned to Michael Sheffe, the designer behind the Back to the Future DeLorean. He polished the teapot concept into something futuristic yet organic. The result was a ship that seemed to shift in light, never static, always alive. What could have been a forgettable saucer became one of the 1980s most iconic sci-fi vehicles, a chrome relic that still looks futuristic nearly 40 years later. The Navigator's morphing spaceship wasn't just cool, it was revolutionary. At the time, CGI was still in its infancy, usually limited to simple wireframes and computer grids, but Flight of the Navigator pushed forward with reflective morphing effects. The ship's transformation from dull shell to gleaming dart required enormous computing power, feeding raw data into machines that filled entire rooms. Every second of footage took painstaking effort to calculate. The result looked like liquid metal shimmering with light. It was one of Hollywood's first fully rendered CGI reflections, years before Terminator 2's T-1000 stunned audiences. In fact, James Cameron later admitted he studied Navigator's exact technique for inspiration. For a modest Disney film, it was groundbreaking, proving even family sci-fi could pioneer technology decades ahead of its time. For all the cutting-edge CGI, Max himself wasn't just a digital trick. Inside the ship, his swiveling eye stalk, blinking lights, and shifting panels were controlled by a team of puppeteers working off-camera. They pulled wires, triggered mechanics, and timed movements in real time while Joey Kramer acted alongside them. That mix of practical puppetry and subtle effects gave Max a presence no computer alone could deliver in 1986. The combination of cutting-edge visuals outside and hands-on mechanics inside made the Navigator ship believable. Max felt real, not because of technology alone, but because old-school craftsmanship made him physically exist within the film's world. It might surprise some fans, but the man who directed Flight of the Navigator also brought us Grease, one of the biggest musicals of all time. Randall Kleiser's career zigzagged wildly between genres, from teenage romance to survival dramas like The Blue Lagoon, to comedies like Big Top Pee-wee, and even Honey, I Blew Up the Kid. 8 years after Grease, he shifted into science fiction adventure. Kleiser even slipped in a subtle nod. The story begins in 1978, the very year Grease ruled the box office. It was his playful wink to the past. Though he never became a household name, Kleiser's unique career path explains why Navigator feels so unusual compared to typical Disney adventures. If Max's wisecracking voice ever sounded familiar, that's because it came from Paul Reubens, better known as Pee Wee Herman. At the height of Pee Wee's fame, Reubens wanted to keep his identity quiet, so in the credits, he cheekily listed himself under the alias Paul Mall. By hiding his name, Reubens avoided distracting audiences who might otherwise only hear Pee Wee instead of Max. The gamble worked. His playful delivery transformed the spaceship's AI from a cold guide into a mischievous co-pilot. That unmistakable laugh gave the character a strange, childlike energy that balanced David's fear with humor. It also helped cement Max as one of the most memorable sci-fi sidekicks of the 1980s. Fans later discovered the truth, but by then, Max already had his own cult following. When David first enters the spaceship, Max doesn't act like a friend. His voice is monotone, robotic, and almost unsettling. That wasn't a mistake, it was intentional. The filmmakers wanted audiences to feel wary of the ship, unsure whether David could trust it. Everything changes once Max scans David's brain. Suddenly, the AI picks up his slang, humor, and pop culture references. Overnight, Max shifts from alien overseer to mischievous buddy. It wasn't just comic relief, it was character growth. Max literally evolves by learning from David, transforming from machine to companion. For kids watching in 1986, it felt magical, like seeing a robot discover humanity in real time. That shift is why fans still remember the film with such warmth, because even a machine could become a friend. Most Disney movies of the 1980s used traditional orchestras. Composer Alan Silvestri, already famous for Back to the Future, this wasn't a keyboard you could grab from a store. It was a $1 million computer that filled entire rooms, capable of generating alien sounds no human could play. Silvestri programmed every note by hand, layering pulsing beats and shimmering tones that felt futuristic. The soundtrack became one of the first all-electronic scores for a Disney film, giving the movie its surreal, otherworldly atmosphere. Decades later, it still sounds unlike anything else Disney produced in that era. For kids, it felt like hearing music from the future, perfect for a story about time travel. In early drafts, Max wasn't funny at all. He was terrifying. Inspired by HAL 9000 from 2001, A Space Odyssey, the first version of Max was cold, clinical, and merciless. He didn't joke or banter, he controlled the ship against David's will, treating him like cargo instead of a companion. Test readers quickly realized this made the story feel more like horror than family sci-fi. Disney executives knew kids wouldn't love a villainous AI trapping the hero. So, the writers reimagined Max, infusing him with humor, slang, and playful quirks. That change saved the movie. Instead of leaving audiences unsettled, it gave kids a character they adored. Not everything filmed made it into the final cut. One scrapped scene involved David meeting a younger version of Carolyn, the NASA intern, when he returned to 1978. It was a surreal twist that teased time paradoxes, but risked confusing the story. Disney cut it before release. Other planned moments were dropped before filming. One draft explained scientists reverse-engineered technology from David's memories. Another described an alien as a grotesque slug, rather than a silly creature. These were stripped away to keep the movie family-friendly. The edits streamlined the story, but also trimmed away its stranger edges. Still, hints of that weirder, darker version remain buried in the finished film. Fans have long wondered what those deleted pieces might have added if Disney had kept them in. Flight of the Navigator had a rough journey to the screen. It started under Viking Film, a small production company that collapsed before shooting was even complete. Disney stepped in, but the studio was cautious after the commercial failure of Return to Oz. To minimize risk, Disney only handled US distribution, leaving overseas rights to a company called Producers Sales Organization. In Australia, the film was even released under Warner Bros. Roadshow branding, with no Disney name attached. To audiences abroad, Navigator didn't even look like a Disney film. Then PSO went bankrupt the same year. Despite corporate chaos and fractured marketing, the movie still reached theaters. Its survival proved that even unstable productions can become lasting cult classics. When it finally opened in 1986, Flight of the Navigator wasn't a blockbuster. The budget sat around $9 million, and the movie earned just under $19 million domestically. Respectable, but far from a smash hit. Its timing hurt. Released on August 1st, it competed directly with Howard the Duck, which bombed but sucked up press attention. Disney's own Great Mouse Detective was still running strong, pulling away family audiences. As a result, Navigator quietly slipped under the radar. While kids loved it, executives were underwhelmed by its performance. The movie's real life came later, through VHS rentals, cable reruns, and word of mouth. Slowly, it grew from overlooked oddity into a beloved cult film. Its legacy wasn't built at the box office, it was built in living rooms. On screen, Joey Kramer seemed like every kid's dream, flying a spaceship with a wisecracking robot sidekick. Off-screen, life turned much darker. After the movie, he faded from Hollywood and struggled through the late 1980s and 1990s. Addiction, petty crime, and personal struggles spiraled into a shocking 2016 bank robbery in British Columbia. Mugshots replaced movie posters, but Kramer's story didn't end there. After serving time, he began rebuilding his life. He turned toward mentoring at-risk youth, openly sharing his struggles so others could avoid his mistakes. At fan conventions, he embraced his cult legacy, meeting audiences who grew up loving David Freeman. To them, he wasn't just a cautionary tale. He was a survivor, a boy lost in time who finally found his way back. Not all of Joey Kramer's pain came years later. Some of it happened on set. During downtime, he and actress Carrie Rogers, who played his 1978 crush, passed time skateboarding. It was harmless fun until disaster struck. One board shot out, smacked Joey square in the mouth, and split his lip open. For days, he filmed with a swollen, bruised face. Cameras didn't stop rolling, and if you look closely, you can spot the injury in certain scenes. Most audiences never noticed, but once you know, it's impossible to unsee. Hollywood has spent decades trying to bring Flight of the Navigator back. In 2009, Disney hired Brad Copeland to write a new script. In 2012, Colin Trevorrow was briefly attached before moving on to Jurassic World. In 2017, the Jim Henson Company announced a revival, but it quietly fizzled out. The most promising news came in 2021, when Disney Plus revealed Bryce Dallas Howard. Fans thought it was finally happening. Yet nothing followed. No casting, no trailer, no release date. Decades later, the ship remains stranded in development limbo, orbiting but never landing. The irony is almost poetic. A movie about finding your way home can't seem to find its way back to theaters. The original remains untouchable, frozen in time. Flight of the Navigator was never Disney's biggest hit, but it became something rarer, a movie that stuck in the imagination. A boy lost in time, a ship that shimmered like chrome, and an alien computer that learned how to laugh. Decades later, it still feels timeless. If this one ever made you dream of flying away, drop a comment and tell us what forgotten classic we should explore next.